This is Duke University.
Start by saying that the last time I saw Pete Seeger was at John Cohen's 80th birthday. And it's impossible to talk about the new Lost City Ramblers and American culture without thinking about the intersection with things like people like Pete Seeger and the folk song revival. So I'm just going to throw it to John and ask him to talk a little bit about Pete, whatever, however he wants, and that's just going to be a sort of doorway we're walking through, and this whole idea of bringing forth older music into the present. It's what Pete did, it's what the new Lost City Ramblers did, and I think it's what Jerron and the Downhill Strugglers are doing. When you add their ages up, it almost meets John's age. How in the world does John look the youngest? Well, that's part of what we're be exploring. John, did Pete's banjo instrument, how to play the 5-string banjo. Is that how you learned?
Not exactly, but close. Way back in 1948, I met a guy named Woody Wachtel who'd been to the East Kentucky and learned how to play the banjo from a wonderful player named Rufus Crisp. And we made banjos, and it was banjos with a tack head and a cat's gut and gut strings and no frets. And and you were playing it downstroke. That was my first impression of the banjo. 4 weeks later, I saw Pete Seeger on a political rally for Henry Wallace, playing the five-string banjo in other ways and singing good songs. And then I guess it was a year later when I was at college, and I met Peggy Seeger. She was at the Putney School then, and she sold me this little mimeograph thing for 50 cents. It was how to play the 5-string banjo that Pete had put together. And it's fascinating. I don't know how many of you have started on that, but this bump-a-ditty, bump-a-ditty, in a way it was very conceptually clear and worked. But it was not totally misleading, but it was only one approach. And as in recent years, it's gotten richer and richer the more that we find out about the banjo. And it's been wonderful in that respect. But I did struggle with bump-ditty, and what's the most amazing contribution of that book? Hammering on and pulling off. Yep. Pete made up those phrases to describe how to play, and that's used universally now. But my parents did international folk dancing. They were immigrants or children of immigrants. They were raised on the Lower East Side. There were settlement houses there, Madison Street Settlement House, where they taught international folk dancing. Children of immigrants. They didn't teach them their own cultures. They taught them, they had a philosophy, international. It's some, anyhow. And I was raised with them doing that around the house. That was with the biggest pleasures that they had. They had a lot of other interests, of course. And then when I was a teenager, it was my time to break away from them, get away from this international folk dancing stuff. And I heard some old hillbilly records, and I heard Woody Guthrie. That was 1948. It's been on that track ever since, and it gets richer and deeper. And I've been all around the place, recording music, filming it, and performing it. It's been it's a trip. I'm a specialist. One of the greatest experiences in my life with music was this wonderful East Kentucky banjo and guitar player, Roscoe Holcomb. And I listened to his music and say, well, that's the real way, that's the traditional way. But then as years go on, I realized that's Roscoe's way. And that everybody else can do their own version of it. His wasn't the original, it was just very original, it was his origins. Mm-hmm. And it took me years to understand that. So in a way, we have this terrible ambition to plug into other person's personalities. But in a way, that's the university-trained person's burden. You know too much. Yeah. How to get rid of it. Well, I think we were young and didn't know what was ahead of us, which is a much better way to go about this. You know, you do something and you don't know where you're going, and then someone wants to hear you, so you go there. But there was no path to follow, which was helpful. I mean, I look back on those records and all I can hear is what's wrong with them. And then people tell me, boy, like you said, boy, that was great. You guys were so energetic and it was such good music. So I have to build another framework with which to listen to what we did. And sometimes it works. We did our first record. We recorded in the fall of '58, came out in January '59. The first year it sold 400 copies. And they went to places, to clubs and folk festivals, and suddenly we were playing all over the place. By July '59, and I had just come back from Kentucky where I was getting into the music much. Then we were invited to the Newport Folk Festival, and we were so different from everybody else and dressed like we are now. And people commented on that. You know, these are not slick professionals. We were just ourselves. So there was a lot of writing about us. It seemed new, but to me it was just sloppy, but it was good. But I think the main point is that I've come to realize is that we didn't know what was ahead all the time. There was no path to follow. And that's interesting when you have it. That's right. And we played for fun. And then suddenly we found that we were leading a crusade. And as you pointed out, everywhere we'd go, we'd come back next year and there'd be another string band. And since we were going so many places, then there were string bands all over the place.
And they all wore vests.
Oh, we did. The reason we wore vests is that a club said, we'll hire you, but we can't come dressed like you are. And so I said, oh my God. Like Tom Pale used to make a joke about what the difference between us and the Kingston Trio. He said, the Kingston Trio wore striped shirts that went up and down, and we wear striped shirts that were sideways. So when we fell down, we were like the Kingston Trio. We'd say things like on the stage. You don't know where it was coming from. And I always try to get Tom to remember all these jokes. He doesn't remember any of them because they were on-the-spot things. We were pretty lively on the stage. We were just throwing things at each other, and we tuned way too much. And so we had to make up folklore.
No such thing as tuning too much. No such thing.
Too much tuning.
No, you tune because you care.
Yeah, but if you're compulsive, and if you're using two systems and you want to use the overtones and the fifth fret, you're doing something, and it doesn't work. Tom was into that. I told the story last night. So one time on the stage at a club in Los Angeles, the Ash Grove, and we were having trouble tuning, and I said to Tom, your guitar's flat, Lester. Well, your banjo's sharp, Cecil. So Mike comes in and says, don't be such a child, Francis. What the hell we were doing? Probably
After taking it to folk music scholarship to follow that.
But that's the kind of stuff that we would throw out. I knew Pete for 60 years. My God, it's a long time. And I was with him just a few weeks ago as he was dying. And a few weeks before that, when his mind was sort of going on, I was trying to engage with him at the house. And I said, Pete, you're one of the few people I've ever known who really changed the world. Your work with the Hudson River revival, with the Hudson River changed the whole ecology of that and the consciousness of the political things and the consciousness about music. I said, it's an amazing thing that you did. And he says, well, he has all these tapes. Pete's head is loaded with different tapes. He said, I view myself like Johnny Appleseed. I traveled around planting seeds everywhere, and some of them grew and some of them didn't. I thought that was fun. I thought I could share that with you. But then recently my little grandson says, oh, what is it about Grandpa Pete, Peter Pop they call him. What's important about him? I said, well, he cleaned up the Hudson River and he stood up to Congress. He stood up to Congress? I I thought that was, who knows how the next generation is going to see it, but that's fine. And Pete was a wonderful old-time musician. He could play terrific banjo, and on some of his records, he learns off the old records and plays just like them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not that it was the only shtick in his life, but since we're old-time musicians, and then another way of thinking about it, just like he said about the C's, we picked up his concern about old-time music and traditional music, and we spent our lives on that. And Mike Seeger, totally,
Right.
that became his life. But Peggy has another life, and everybody has a different Pete story. I just thought these little few personal things might help. Although, one more memory. I was called in as he was dying to go into the hospital, and the 3 or 4 of us came in to play music. He was unconscious, and tubes and all that, and he was unable to speak. But when we played the music, you could see his whole demeanor was a little bit alive and jumping around. It was 2 or 3 days of that. And then it was time to leave for me, and they said, what can you say? And I said, I'm going to be saying something to somebody who can't really hear me, but perhaps can sense the vibration. And I said something like, Pete, you've been around a long time, and you will be around a long time. So that was my last words, and I thought I could share that with you. I went on laughing in my heart of glory. All I heard was you love say on your chicken over day, all coming out, woo, woo, got that chicken away. Once I had a great big house, 18 stories high. Every story in that house was back again.